book lover. I am so glad you are here listening to my award-winning podcast, Thoughts from a Page, which is a member of the Evergreen Podcasts Network. The show is a passion project for me, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoy making it. I only interview authors whose books I have read and enjoyed, so if I am chatting with an author on the main show, it means that I really liked their book and feel comfortable recommending it to you. With so many books coming out weekly, it can be hard to decide what to read, so I work hard to find the best ones and share them with you. For more book recommendations and to find my backlist of interviews, visit my website at thoughtsfromapage.com. Are you looking for an engaging book community with unique bonus content? If so, I hope you will consider joining my Patreon community, which is filled with a wonderful group of readers. I offer 3 levels: page turners, lit lovers, and royal readers, and each level provides all sorts of cool bonus book content that you will not find elsewhere. If you're interested or want more information, the link to join is in my show notes. Today, I am chatting with Peter Heller about The Last Ranger. Peter is the national best-selling author of The Guide, The River, Celine, The Painter, and The Dog Stars. He is also the author of 4 nonfiction books. He holds an MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop in Poetry and Fiction and lives in Denver, Colorado. I hope you enjoy our conversation. And now for a quick break. For the last year, I have been focusing more on my health and eating habits. In connection with that, I have started drinking AG1 in the morning. When I started drinking AG1 daily, I could feel a real difference in my health and energy levels. That is because AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that supports your body's universal needs like gut optimization, stress management, and immune support. Since 2010, AG1 has led the future of foundational nutrition, continuously refining their formula to create a smarter, better way to elevate your baseline health. I recommend AG1 to all of my family and friends because the company has a team of doctors and scientists. It is tested for 950 contaminants and is NSF certified for sport. It is formulated based on the latest science, and it maintains high quality standards. Thanks AG1 for sponsoring my show. AG1 is a supplement I trust to provide the support my body needs daily. If you want to take ownership of your health, it starts with AG1. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3K2 and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/thoughtsfromapage. That's drinkag1.com/thoughtsfromapage. Check it out. And now back to my show. Welcome, Peter. How are you today?
Oh, I'm great. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I am so glad you're here because I absolutely loved The Last Ranger. And then as soon as I read it, I passed it to my husband, and he also absolutely loved it. So I'm thrilled to pieces to get to chat with you.
Great. Me too.
So the first thing I usually do is have an author give me a quick synopsis of the book. Can you do that?
Sure. The Last Ranger is about an enforcement national park ranger in Yellowstone who likes wolves better than people. And he's sort of lost in his life. At the moment, he's in his mid-30s, and he's sort of taken this job to reconnect with nature. He loves to fish. He loves wild country. And there he is in the middle of the Lamar Valley. That's where he lives, in a little log cabin, which is the Serengeti of the United States. That's what it's been called. And it's this valley way up in the northeast corner of Yellowstone, where the wolves were first reintroduced in 1995 and have now established some healthy packs. It's a great wildlife reintroduction story. And so Ren Hopper, our ranger, lives in a log cabin in this ranger station that's called the Buffalo Ranch. And his only neighbor is Hilly, and she is a famous wolf biologist who lives just above him. And she really likes wolves better than people. She can't stand most people, even though she's on Nova and National Geographic Channel and the History Channel in stories about wolves. She's really a famous biologist, but she only does that stuff to sort of advocate for her packs. And she's a serious scientist, and she likes Ren and will, early in the morning, sometimes just at first light, stop by his cabin on the way down to her truck, and they'll have coffee on the porch as they're looking out over the valley. The valley is a shallow river that runs through meadows, hemmed in on either side by steep slopes of black timber and rimrock, and there's often herds of elk and deer and wolves. So it begins there, and there's a little town 20 minutes up the road called Cook City, Montana, just outside the park boundary. And it's a really tiny town, just sort of a main street with a highway running through it. And I'd say half the population there are sick of tourists because they work 16 hours a day catering to them during the summer. And half of them, probably that half, sort of resent the national park and kind of wish it was all open for hunting and logging and all of that. So it's a very interesting dynamic, and that's how the book begins.
Well, before I dive into my questions, you have something you want to share with my listeners.
Yeah, I thought maybe I would just read a paragraph towards the beginning of the book. Here we go. Hilly's truck was not in the turnaround. Sometimes she stayed out late to observe nocturnal hunting behaviors and didn't get in till the middle of the night. He dropped his pack on the porch and pulled out his wet gear. He hung his waders from a nail on a porch post and left his fishing boots on the top step. He had his hand on the screen door when he heard it, very faint. He held his breath and turned an ear and listened. Far off but clear, the strain of a single wolf. Two barks testing the night, almost like a tuning, the confirming plucks of a string, and then a rising, resonant howl that froze the stars in place and dropped and hollowed like a woodwind and crescendoed again. The night went taut like a drum skin, as if the solitary wolf had willed all of creation into a sounding board or bout for his song. That's what it was, music. It rooted Wren to the floorboards. The cry climbed and thinned and wavered. It held desolation and yearning and joy all together, somehow. The hairs on the back of Wren's neck stood up. He wondered if it did the same for the others in the pack, raised their hackles, but not in anger, in ferocious love, because as another wolf lifted her voice in answer, she was much closer, somewhere at the base of Druid Peak. And as another and another loosed a pitched cry from across the valley, that's the way it sounded, like the most desolate, life-affirming love.
Well, the wolf aspect of your story is the reason I first picked up your book. I have been completely fascinated with the wolf reintroduction to Yellowstone. I read American Wolf. I've read anything I can about it. I would love to visit and be able to see the wolves, and that is on my bucket list at some point. And that just completely drew me to your story. So that's the perfect passage to read.
Great.
How did you become interested in that?
So I got an assignment a few years ago from Condé Nast Traveler to write a story about the wolves up in the Lamar Valley. And, I went on a wildlife tour. My wife and I did for, I think, something like 5 days. And it was at the time of year that the book is set in. It was sort of, I think it was late September. And we went out. I remember being struck by the beauty of the valley. And then we came out early in the morning, right at first light, maybe in the dark. And we set spotting scopes up on a hill, aimed across the river. And the first light came up, and there was a herd of elk. And then I saw wolves at the edge of the trees. And this wildness, this sense of wildness just prickled over my skin. And I'd never really experienced anything like it. It was so moving. And for the next 5 days, in this very wild and beautiful place, we got to observe the pack at this rendezvous point in this meadow across the valley and watch the pups, tumble and play, watch pairs of wolves come in from downstream early in the morning with meat, that they, from a kill, bringing it back to the pups. I just became completely fascinated. And so over the next couple of years, the last few years, I have camped in the Lamar Valley in September and hiked up these tributary creeks to fish and watch the wolves whenever I can. I just love it. When I first went to Yellowstone, I thought it was going to be like Jellystone, like sort of cartoonish and a big circus. And it really is, along the main roads, those narrow kind of 2-lane roads. If even a marmot crosses the road or is visible, then, there's a traffic jam, and, to say nothing of a herd of bison or whatever. And so it is kind of crazy that way. But, once I sort of hike up a trail along a tributary creek and I get a mile, actually, I get half a mile away from the road, I don't see anybody. And I can spend all day up in a meadow fishing, and there'll be a bison, chomping grass, grazing right beside me, basically. And I'll see grizzly bears sometimes at the edge of the trees grubbing for stuff. And it's just fantastic. I just love it. And so that's sort of where the book sort of, I think, came out of that adoration of the place and being there.
Well, the interesting part for me was I started with the interest in the wolves, and I loved that part of the story. But we spend a lot of time in Rocky Mountain National Park every summer. And parts of your story really resonated with me with respect to that, in terms of Ren being a ranger and the things he has to deal with, like the moose and the family that gets way too close to it. I mean, we see that every single summer. And Rocky Mountain has now implemented this ticketed entry, which angers both locals and some visitors. And the rangers are having to turn around more people than they're letting in. They've got signs everywhere. They've got stuff on their website. Still, people try to come in. And I just think these rangers must have more patience than Job. I mean, I just can't even imagine. I'd be like, come on, people, can you not read? And I just think it would be a really difficult job to have these days.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I think it's hard for Ren. And I think when we catch him, in September at the end of the summer, I think he's kind of burned out.
Sure.
At the very beginning, he kind of wishes of the book, he kind of wishes that all the tourists would just go home and leave the animals, the forests and the meadows, on their own.
Exactly.
He has to question himself, what am I doing in this service job if, I really wish everybody would just leave.
Right. But I think there's also different types of tourists. I mean, there's some tourists who know what they're doing and they follow the rules and they kind of go along and do what they're supposed to do. And then you have these people who should be following the rules, should know the rules, but just go ahead and do whatever they want to do. And I'm sure those are the people that after a while, Ren's thinking, come on. And then also there is the local dynamic versus the park and how you deal with that. And people are unhappy with him because of his role as a ranger at the park. So there's just a lot of interesting things that are playing out in the real world and in your book.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I always start with the first line. I never know where I am because I came up as a poet. I was much more interested in the music and the language than, any kind of plot. And so in this book, the first line was the night of the buffalo, it rained. And then it was, I think, hard, flooding the creek for hours as if trying to wash away the stain. And I just like the sound of those two sentences. And pretty soon it occurred to me that here I was in one of my favorite places on the planet. And here was this ranger who I liked. I mean, I sort of related to. He liked to fish. He really liked to spend time by himself. He enjoyed some people. And it was, thrilling for me then to, find myself, parachuting into this place. And pretty quickly, as often happens in the books, and I don't really mean it to, there was a really menacing conflict. And, that was fun to get hooked into that narrative.
Definitely. And I don't want to spoil anything, but I thought that the conflict was really interesting because it is also very timely. I think there is so much division today, and you brought that into your story.
Yeah, I kind of have to. I mean, I don't know. When you use the method that I use to write a novel, where you just sort of follow your nose and the language into the story, what I find is that within a few pages or a chapter, I end up bumping into whatever is really on my heart, or what I'm really concerned about, or what I've been thinking about. And so I think, the divisions that we're all not just bearing witness, that we're all caught up in, I think that had to inform this story.
So when you start writing, you haven't laid anything out. You just sit down and start writing.
Yeah, I want to have as much fun as my readers, and not only, did I come up as a poet where, music was important. I was a river runner my whole life, and kayaking, stuff all over the place. And what happens when you're running a river that has never been described, or you don't know, you're on this current, you come around a tight bend, maybe in a gorge or a canyon, and you don't know what's going to be there. It could be a waterfall, and you better catch an eddy and pull out and take a look, or it could be a cougar drinking, or a flight of swallows backlit that's just so beautiful. And it's just, I love that about kayaking rivers. I love that part of it, the sort of surprise and that feeling of adventure and exploration into new territory. And so, for me, having writing a novel, have it be like running a river that's unknown is so thrilling. It's so fun, to bring, have it be like an expedition for me when I'm writing it at night. Stuff will happen. I'll be in my coffee shop and, I'll have tears just streaming off my chin onto the table. And I know people there are sort of looking and thinking, that poor son of a bitch is going through a bad divorce or whatever.
Exactly. I was just going to say they're coming over like, are you okay?
Yeah. But really what's happening is I'm just totally immersed, and I'm being carried by that narrative current, and something's just happened that surprised me. And what's really happening is I'm sort of more thrilled than I've ever been in my life. So it's a really fun process. Not to say that I don't, run into cul-de-sacs like every writer, and I might, throw out a lifeline, call a friend, call my editor, Jenny Jackson, say, hey, what do you think I should do now? And sometimes, I will think about, generally blocking a story out, out ahead a little bit, but mostly I just let it run. It's sort of like being on a mountain horse who knows the way, and just giving the horse its head.
Does that mean you have to edit a lot more? Or do you just flow in the right direction like the mountain horse and end up where you need to be?
Usually I end up where I need to be. Sometimes, I have really good first readers, and I'll read blocks of my novel aloud out to my wife Kim, and she's has an impeccable sense of story and character, and she can feel right where the soft spots are right away. And so that's super helpful. And often, I'll be reading aloud to her, and she'll nod off at the end of the couch and go, "Too much fishing."
I love that. You're like, not enough fishing. What do you mean?
Right. But I know she's always right, because she's, she's the stand-in for the general reader, and so, but anyway, and then I have a couple of other first readers, Lisa Jones, Helen Thorpe, Donna Gersten. They're super helpful. And then it goes to my agent. He will do a line edit and might have me do some work. So by the time it gets to Jenny, it's in pretty good shape. And she'll often say, okay, I'd like to, move this scene up, or can you develop this just a little bit more? And can we have a scene here that, involves these characters so that this becomes clear? And it'll be something like that. And I'm very fast. So usually I can do that stuff in a few days, and then, then it's done.
That's great. Because I just can't even imagine trying to sit down with a blank page and write like that. And I knew if I did it, I would have to just be editing and editing and editing.
Well, the downfall of doing it like the way I do it is that you make a lot of false starts. So I will spend, a couple of weeks, usually 2 or 3 weeks, just making starts, throwing them out, telling myself, that I don't have another novel in me. I can't do this. There's no story. I got nothing to say. I do that. And I've done it, 6, 7, 8 times now. And I know that that's what I do. And then somehow, within, a couple of weeks, I'll hit a first line that really sings, and there's a voice that I feel like sticking with. But sometimes I won't know for like a week, I'll write along and then think, I don't really want to hang out with this character or this voice or this place or this situation, which is not yet a story. I don't want to really hang out with that for months for the next few months. So I do make false starts. And if you plot, if you have an outline, then you have a map, you have your roadmap, and I don't think you'd make so many false starts. But once I get on that voice, and once I'm in a place that I love, and that there's characters I love, and an interesting situation, then pretty much I'm gone. And I write 1,000 words every day, and 7 days a week, and that's how we do it.
That's amazing. Well, did anybody inspire Ren?
I think Ren is sort of an amalgam of all sorts of people that I know, and I think there's a lot of Ren that I relate to. I'm not saying he's not me. He's a much better fisherman than I am. And he's probably even more patient than I am with people. But I sort of like the things that he likes, and I have aversion for things that he doesn't like, and a way of kind of looking at the world that I relate to. So I think we are sort of close that way.
So you write the book, and then you go out into the world and tour. Do readers respond to different things than you expect them to? Do they respond to the things that you think they will? What is that like for you, like with The Last Ranger?
It's always, it always feels like a crapshoot. I mean, you select. I've launched every book at this wonderful bookstore called the Tattered, a kind of iconic bookstore in Denver called the Tattered Cover. Every one of my books has been launched there, and it's a hometown crowd for sure. They're pretty forgiving, but I choose, the sections that I'm going to read aloud. And usually I don't try and read a ton. Usually it's like 15 minutes of reading all told, and then a lot of stories and questions. It's, discussion. It's really fun. But this book, I felt like I wanted to read more. I read like half an hour's worth, which is a lot for me. And it was, it was really fun. I was a little nervous about, could they take it? I read like the prologue and a couple of pages of chapter 1, and then some scenes, and they loved it. And so I was so happy. And then, on tour, I just decided to trim it down because I knew, I can't, you can do one thing with family and then another thing with, your general readership. So I did trim the readings, but people did really seem to enjoy the ones that I chose. So that's always nice.
Well, and I was telling you before we started recording that I had visited the Boulder bookstore right before you were going to be there, like days before you were there on your tour. So I thought, oh, look, there he is. We're getting ready to chat soon. So it has to be fun when the book's been out for a little bit and people come, because then sometimes people have already read it.
Yeah, super fun. Oh, the night at the Boulder Bookstore was just crazy. It was actually the largest crowd they've ever had in the store. Usually when it gets to 100, it was like 120 people, and when it gets up that high, they switch over to the auditorium or whatever at the main library. But they were turning people away, and there was like 120 people, and these are all people that were really big fans of the work, and some of them had read the book, and it was a radio broadcast, and so it was just super fun. I loved it.
I just always think it must be so interesting to take the time to write a book and put your heart and soul into it, and then to listen to what readers have to say. And there have to be some things that you think, I just know they're going to love Ren, but then also have things that they're pointing out that you're like, oh, I did not think that's something that somebody would be interested in, or that might resonate with someone or something. And it must be kind of interesting just to hear what people have to say back to you.
Yeah. I especially love the questions. I mean, people do almost every time people ask questions that nobody has ever asked. And I don't know that I'll be able to come up with one right now, but it keeps you on your toes. You can't, you just can't have pat answers. And all of a sudden some question will come winging in, and, I'll be surprised. It's really fun. I love that part.
Well, I was thinking that too, when you were talking about spending time with a character and writing the book. It's not even just the time that you spend writing it, but then when it gets out into the world, you're touring, you're talking to readers. So you really do want to make sure you're spending time with a character in a place that you want to, because it's going to be with you for quite some time.
Yeah, exactly. And here's the strange thing about fiction, I think, for fiction writers, and I don't think it's just me, is that, the characters that you write in the novels, the major characters, they live in your emotional landscape, and they live in your heart, like, family and friends that you've had. And, like Jasper from the Dog Stars, he lives in my heart like a dog that I've had. I mean, I think about him and I sort of grieve him sometimes, and, wish we could hang out again. And it's really strange. I mean, and it occurs to me that novelists have this access, to these other worlds, these other people that are imaginary that we call characters, these voices sometimes. And it occurs to me that, maybe 150, 200 years ago, we might be in a padded cell for hearing voices. I don't know. But now we get to write a novel and be on tour, and, it's really fun. I'm a very oral writer. Like I sort of hear the lines and I hear the dialogue, before I put it down.
I think that's so cool, because I am not that way at all. And I'm not a writer, But I just think it would be so cool to be able to hear that stuff. And I've had authors tell me, like, I think about my characters long after I'm done with the book and I wonder what they're doing. And then I ask other authors that and they're like, no. So I think it must just depend on the author. But, some people are like, yes, I continue to think about my characters. And others are like, no, I just put them to bed. But even as a reader, I mean, to me, that's the hallmark of a really great book. If I am done with it and I am still thinking about those characters and what they did and how they impacted me months later.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what we all hope for as writers of these things, that it will change people in some way. And, my dearest hope for this book, and I've read it in some of the reviews and stuff, and so it's gratifying, is that it will make people, my readers, think about our relationship with the natural world and our relationship with other species and our place, on the planet and in the universe, as just another species sharing this planet, with those responsibilities. And, this idea that all the other species, whether it's a harrier flushing mice over the meadows, a hawk, or a caterpillar, or a trout, or a grizzly bear, or a wolf, that, all of us have the same right to be here and to try and make a living.
Absolutely. It made me want to just buy a ton of copies and pass it out to people at Rocky Mountain and be like, okay, read this book so you understand what it's like to behave in a national park.
Right.
And how important it is to respect the earth. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's my hope, is that that's what people take away from it. And I think some people are so good.
Yes, for sure. Exactly. I was like, yes. What surprised you the most when you were writing the book?
What surprised me the most was that, so there's a bad guy in the book, and his name is Les Ingram. And as Les, continued to comport himself in questionable ways through the book and get into, more and more intense conflict with some of my other characters. What surprised me was that Les was not that much different, in his essential character than my hero Ren. And I love that. I love that there was sort of this Venn diagram where they overlap. And I love that, good people aren't always completely good, and that, the people we think of as bad people aren't always completely bad, and that everybody has their reasons for doing what they do. And I just loved how that revealed itself as the narrative went on.
I agree with that completely. And my husband and I actually talked about that for a long time after we both finished the book. And I don't, again, want to have any spoilers, but we talked a lot about the way the book resolved and Les and his character and how Ren handled things. It definitely made for a very genuine and realistic storyline, but also something that was worth spending a lot of time talking about.
Oh, great. That makes me happy.
No,
Yes.
I thought that was very good. I really liked the way you handled that.
Oh, thank you.
Well, tell me about the cover. I'm a huge cover person. I thought your cover was beautifully, beautifully done. How did that come about?
Well, I just have the most amazing, cover designer in the world at Knopf. And so I think Kelly has done every single one of my covers. She reads the book and she just somehow, I don't know, she somehow finds a way to distill it, to make it exciting visually, and her name is Kelly Blair. And I just love all of her covers. And this one especially struck me because there was something that looked like Yellowstone Canyon. And then it's got this silhouette of a wolf howling, this black silhouette in the foreground up on a spur on a bluff. And the colors are just so beautiful. They're sort of earthy ochres and pastel blues, and you can see a distant ridge in the background. And I just love it. It's always fun, books are cool because they're not, it's not the stories, it's not an audio book. A book is an artifact, it has heft, it has dimension, it can be visually arresting. And I love books themselves as works of art. And I think this one is. It's really exciting for me.
I agree with that. She definitely captured the essence of the book. I love to look at a cover, read the book, and then look at the cover again just to see if everything matches up. And I just feel like that she definitely captured your story with this cover.
Oh, that's neat. That's cool. Yeah. Great. That's a good thing to do. Anyway.
It is, because I think sometimes a cover can be beautiful on its own, but then you read the book and you're like, I don't really see the connection with this cover in this book. Like I can like the inside and I can like the outside, but I don't see how they go together. And so I like it when they go together. So yours goes together quite well.
Nice.
Passes my test.
Yay.
Well, Peter, before we wrap up, what have you read recently that you really liked?
I am reading right now. I love the cover on this too. I'm reading The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. And I love McBride. During COVID, I think is when I came late to the party, but I read Deacon King Kong, I think during COVID. And I had, been sick for a couple of weeks and it wasn't that fun. I was at home and I read that book and it just cheered me up so much. It was so beautiful and so fun and funny and so full of heart. So that's what I'm reading right now. And I have, of course, a stack that I need to get to. But
isn't that always the case? My stack is just so much larger than I could ever get to, but it just continues to grow.
I know. I got to read Russo's new book, Richard Russo. I had dinner with him the other night at a book festival in Mississippi, and he was I'd met him before in passing, but I'd never sat down and talked with him for a couple of hours. And he was so down to earth and so humble. And what he was really most excited about was his daughter's fiction that she's writing. And, he was such a sweet person. And so I definitely need to read his new book too.
I love his books and I'm really excited for his new one as well.
Yeah.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the Thoughts from a Page podcast.
It was such a pleasure. What a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Coming up on 5 Minute News, I'm Anthony Davis. You might think it's partisan because maybe it's critical of one side or the other, but it's not. It's just the truth. And I think that's also something that's kind of unusual for Americans listening to the radio or to podcasts, because the news landscape in the States has been so partisan for so many decades. So 5 Minute News is verified, truthful, independent, unbiased, and essential world news daily.
Thank you so much for listening to my podcast. I would love to connect with you on Instagram or Facebook, where you can find me at Thoughts from a Page. If you enjoy the show, please consider joining my Patreon group to access bonus content and support the podcast. If you have a moment to rate the show or subscribe to it wherever you listen to your podcasts, I would really appreciate it. It makes a big difference. And please tell all of your friends about Thoughts from a Page. Word of mouth does wonders to help the show grow. The book discussed in this episode can be purchased at my bookshop storefront, and the link is in the show notes. I hope you'll tune in next time.
Hear Her Sports is a podcast for everyone who loves stories by and about women striving to improve and make a difference in their lives. I am your host, Elizabeth Emery, a former professional cyclist. In every episode, I introduce a female athlete or woman in the business of sport through a thoughtful conversation about who they are and the terrific work they're doing. My guests and I explore the glorious and frustrating issues in sports, history, equity, training, nutrition, and so much more. Join us for inspiration, for community, and for love of being a strong, athletic woman.